Space Laces is on another level, his sound design is insane, his mixdowns hit like a truck, and his ideas are just from another planet. When I first heard This Way, it straight up gave me goosebumps. The vibe, the groove, the sound textures, everything just clicked, so I had to remake it. Like always, you can grab this project from my Patreon below with millions of others, but right now let's jump into it. For the first step, I want to analyze one bass shot from the original song. This might sound easy, but actually a lot of things are happening inside of that. So obviously we have a nice saturated sub and the noise layer that basically just plays only in the beginning of the sound. And also these crackles that I bet there are some unison voices in the sound, because as you can see the places of them are quite random. So the engineering behind it is very clever, but before I remake it, let's talk about the drums. There is a lot of things we can talk about that. So the kick is just a regular kick, but the snare, this snare can easily be made from any noise basically. I used this noise because it contains very unique kind of mid-lows, mids and high frequencies. So I dropped it inside the sampler, and for the attack, to actually create the attack or the transient for the clap, I used the built-in FM synthesizer with these settings. I play with the transposition to find a sweet spot, and after that with some saturation and some huge compression to create the transient, this sound was born. I tried to match EQ it with the original, and after that I bounced it. And inside the drum rack I played again with the transposition, with pitch shifter and the final EQ to focus on the mid-highs like every clap. Now the hi-hats are even more interesting, because in the original it can be very confusing what you can hear as the hi-hats and what is the bass. Now in the original we clearly hear that on these kicks there are some hi-hats. So I went to the Ableton Core library and chose a few hits, and this loop was born. But this is not what I heard in the original. So that's why I dropped in this noise and layered it up with the hi-hats. But if I add the other drums, something is missing. And that is the autopan that vibrates the whole group. So as you can see, this is the heads group on the kick and the snare. And to crunch them together, I use an overdrive with an EQ after the autopan. And the utility here is to choke the whole heads loop, because at the second part, I totally release it. So the autopan trick creates an illusion that the whole stuff is very heavily saturated, but it's actually not.
Yo, I made another video about Space Laces, click here if you wanna check it.
Now it is time to talk about the effects, because they might sound simple, but actually they are very clever. So in the second part of the drop we have these. So the first one is basically just a saw wave with 5 voices of unison, a delay and EQ to focus it more on the mids, and a little bit of distortion. The second one is based on sine wave, but I can hear some vibration onto it. And this time the trick is not FM, like you would go with first I bet, but instead AM. The basic sine wave is 1 octave and 3 semitones higher, and the 0 octave sine wave modulates it. Because without that, we miss that little vibration on the sound, and after that all we have is just a delay. And if you compare it with the original, basically this is it. We have a very simple wobbleizer again, but basically just a sine wave with the fast LFO moving the pitch of it. So LFO1 is a modulator that basically just drags the pitch of it, then some compression, distortion and delay again. That you can barely hear, but it is there, believe me. And the drone, that can be anything basically with a huge reverb on it, because if I deactivate the reverb, it's 2 wavetables with a noise and the bandpass filter and the basic effects, some distortion, chorus, an EQ to chop off the lows and the delay at the end. Or you can use a sample drone if you want, it doesn't really matter. I was lazy because I just used Lalala to read the vocals. What? Okay, and as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, let's remake that bass. So this is how my remake sounds. So what did I say? We will need sine, a noise and a saw wave on a lower frequency but high pass filter. So I have the sine wave with the noise, and LFO1 moves the level of them, you know, just to have the sine only on the beginning of the sound. I added a low pass filter for some drive, and it's time to add the saw wave. Minor 2 octaves, high pass filter and low pass filter just a little, I didn't want to have it too sharp. Now we don't have the effects on, this is why we don't really hear the saw wave. But first I had to use LFO2 for the pitch, because in the original I hear a little pitch movement on the sine wave. So a little bit of movement can always be handy. So I added a chorus 2 and the distortion. An equalizer to tame the mid-lows on 180 Hz. And the OTT brings everything together now. A little more distortion and a little more compression. So you can hear the crackles came up very nicely. And I use LFO3 only for the filler, because in the original sound, in this part of the bass, I see a little chaos that I think is coming from the low-pass filter on a little higher resonance. I only meet this look in the sine wave when I use a low-pass filter on a higher resonance on a very low frequency. So this is why LFO3 is here on the low-pass filter. We need some post-process, because without those, I use an amp on the blues emulation mode, but the highs and the mid-lows again definitely need some taming. And the same thing with another EQ with a little boost on the mids, and finally just a saturator with the output modulated for the sidechain. Okay, grab this project for my Patreon below, see you guys next time, peace!